That was a really good intro too. And three, two, one. And three, two, one. Good people of the world, of the Instagram world, of the world outside of Instagram, just the world in general. Steven Samuel here. We're talking NBA Finals today. We're talking Game 3. We're talking Miami. We're talking Denver. Predictions, previews, everything leading up to where we're at now. Game 3, going back to Miami. 1-1 series. Miami steals one on the road, as they've done through and through this entire playoff run. This improbable playoff run. Being the 8th seed, barely making it into the playoffs. Getting smoked in the first play-in game by Atlanta. Barely beating Chicago in that second play-in game. Thank you, Max Strus, 31 points. And then beating the first seed Bucks in the first round. Beating the Knicks in the second round, who look poised to make it past the second round, who again were also a higher seed, and then beating the Celtics in that 7-game thriller, where they were supposed to lose as well. Beating the top 2 teams in the East who were supposed to be the representatives for the Eastern Conference in the finals on their route to the finals, where they're playing the Nuggets now, tied 1-1, going back to Miami for Game 3. And my honest opinion, just watching this series, is that it looks like a boxing fight. It's like a heavyweight brawl where you've got the two teams just sizing each other up, waiting for the other to make a mistake, but also not knowing each other well enough to know where those mistakes are going to happen. So each game is a real chess match, game to game. And it's only been 2 games, but it already feels like it has so much built into it. Great coaching staff, great players. It's been a slow, muddy series, which I think Miami likes. Miami likes playing in the mud. They like playing from behind. They like being gritty, grimy, tough. And the Nuggets, not to take anything away from them, I feel like that's what's been the deciding factor outside of Jokic and Murray for the Nuggets in the playoffs as well. They just kick teams' ass. Like Phoenix was having a great time in that series until the physicality just wore them down. Booker and Durant had to play out of their minds in order for Phoenix to win, and they did that for a few games. But then after that, I just felt like the physicality of the Nuggets wore them down the same way they wore down the Lakers in that series as well, in the conference finals. And I think Denver, to their credit, a lot of people talked about the Nuggets having shitty defense, and that was what was going to be the thing that held them back in the finals or throughout the playoffs in general. And you know what? They've answered that bell. They've answered every bell. They've been phenomenal. The playoffs are so great because, sometimes the X's and O's just get thrown out the window. The coaching plan gets, executed to a certain level. But outside of that, it's the dedication, the want to win, the willingness, the drive, that hunger. Both teams certainly are displaying that. Game 2, that edge went to Miami. I think in game 1 to game 2, the Nuggets, they saw a Miami team in game 1 that wasn't representative of who the Heat actually are, and then they got that team in game 2. And once they got that team in game 2, they were a little frustrated, they were flustered, they were caught off guard in terms of like, was this the team we were supposed to see in game 1? Because they didn't show up in game 1. This is a totally different team. It's like swiping left and then showing up to the date and be like, damn, that doesn't look like what I originally saw. And so I think they got a little bit caught off guard. And because of that, Miami just fell back into who they are. They're aggressive. They play team defense. They're on a string. They all move together on both sides of the floor. They just attack, and they're relentless. They don't give up. They've got such great leadership, not only on the coaching staff, but on the bench. We don't have to even bring up Udonis Haslem and the impact that he has on those players in the locker room, but just Kevin Love's impact that he has, Bam, Jimmy, like that team, that core that's been together, who now has gone to the finals 2 out of the last 4 years, and were 1 shot away from making the finals last year. So they could have potentially been in the finals the last 3 of the last 4 years. And so this is a team that's been together. This core has been together. They want this win. They know what it's about. They've been there. They've tasted it. They've tasted the defeat, so they don't want to taste that again. But you can't give this Nuggets team. You can't write them off. You can't write them off, especially after this. And I think a lot of people were talking about the Nuggets sweeping Miami initially when this series started, and now all of a sudden that tone has changed because Miami is doing exactly what they've done every series. Technically on paper, and this has been the rhetoric around the Heat the entire playoffs, is on paper they're not as good as their opponents. They're not as good as Milwaukee. They're not as good as Boston. They're not as good as Denver. And each time they've just been proving everyone wrong, throwing it back in everyone's face, and just doing what Miami does, just grind out wins. And they've got the veteran leadership, like I say, and they've got a game changer and a guy that can finish games. Close games, which Miami loves, which Miami is great at, need a good finisher. Jimmy has been that finisher for Miami all playoffs long, and he's done it before. It's not like the first time he's ever done it, but he's doing it at a different clip right now. Granted, he looks injured right now, and he looks a little gassed, and I think he looked gassed in the last couple of games of that Celtic series, and he's doing a really good job of hiding that on the floor by being a facilitator and getting everyone else involved, and then just coming through in the clutch when he needs to, when they need him, when they rely on him for that. But I think it's just, it's been so fascinating to watch how they can, sometimes Jekyll and Hyde, sometimes show up as a team that you would expect, that you wouldn't expect, and then the next game show up and be like, oh shit, this is them. And I thought that level of frustration settled in on Denver last game when you saw Jokic looking at the referees. He hasn't been doing that all playoffs. He hasn't been looking at the referees. He hasn't been arguing calls. He hasn't been flailing his arms. But clearly the frustration because of Miami becoming who they actually are in Game 2 settled in on the Nuggets and in Jokic, and they were looking at the refs a lot. Granted, to some of those calls, the goaltending call that wasn't called, I should say, that was a block. Bam Adebayo on Murray. That one was close. There was a couple of out-of-bounds plays. I'm not going to say officiating changed the game in any way, but there's always going to be a couple of those calls. But when this team of destiny, so to speak, Miami, the basketball gods seem to have been on their side the entire time, and sometimes it takes a couple of those. In hockey, they call it puck luck. Sometimes you need a little puck luck to get you through. I got notes. I'm looking back at the notes here, and I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. Yeah, I'm talking about the Nuggets and being caught off guard and their lack of aggression. I think that was a big one. Their lack of aggression last game. Even though players weren't really hitting shots, Michael Porter Jr., obvious, that's been sticking out like a sore thumb in terms of how poorly his offensive execution has been. Which, he's actually been playing fantastic throughout the playoffs. Game 1, he had a great overall game, even though he didn't score well. He was playing defense, he was blocking shots, he was hitting his rotations. Last game, Denver, I think on a whole, sort of fell. They got too easy. They're too careless. Oftentimes when the offensive team is setting a pick, as a defender, you want to bump every player as soon as you have a chance to shoulder somebody, you shoulder them. Denver wasn't doing that in Game 2, and that was evident a few times. Duncan Robinson getting a couple of backdoor slips and getting some layups at the rim, and a couple of guys fading out to the 3-point line, to the corners to make some baskets. So Denver sort of fell asleep, I would say, on some assignments, certainly defensively, which Miami capitalized on. Miami had all of those wide open shots that they hit in Game 2. They had open in Game 1. They just weren't hitting for whatever reason. Altitude or not, for whatever reason it was, or altitude and combination of other things, they weren't hitting them. They got those same looks in Game 2, and credit them for being confident enough to just come back and be like, fuck it, we're going to shoot it anyway. Which is what Jimmy told the team after that Game 1 loss, like, I'm going to still pass you the ball, so get ready to shoot. Strus, 4 threes, I think it was, in the first quarter of Game 2. Everyone was hitting. They were hitting the shots that they normally have hit throughout the playoffs, and that's why I say, like, this Heat team is so hard to count out. You know what I mean? Regardless of what they look like on paper, regardless of what they look like in Game 1 to Game 2, they just seem to have the mettle, that sort of, they just have the balls to come out and perform every game, and they do. And it's been fascinating to watch. Having said all of that about the Nuggets and missing assignments and not necessarily coming out and playing as well as they should have, or as well as they could have, really in the first 2 games, to be honest with you, they've faced this type of adversity throughout the playoffs. And, as I said before, they faced that in Phoenix when they were playing Kevin Durant and Booker, who didn't seem like they were going to miss any shots. Booker certainly in the first probably 3 games of that series, and then I think he turned his ankle, and that sort of seemed to set him back a little bit. But throughout the adversity that they've faced, and they've had competitive series, although they've only lost 3 games on the route to the finals, they've had some competitive series and some competitive games. They've never looked shaken. They never have looked rattled. They've seemed stagnant at times, but they've never looked rattled. And obviously the poise of their leadership with Jokic on the floor and Murray on the floor, having those kind of guys on your team, was just the biggest bonus ever. And so, I think that they've pulled through. Obviously, they're in the finals, so they've pulled through any of the adversity that they face. But it will be interesting to see, how this will sort of mount up in the next couple of games. I picked the Nuggets in 6 prior to the series starting. Um, I would love to see it go 7, of course, as a fan. You want to see every series go 7. The deep in my heart, I always want the underdogs to win. I'm always siding with the underdogs, so I want Miami to win. Um, Shout out Jamal Murray, Kitchener, Ontario, of course, being from Canada. We definitely want to see the championship back in Canada. So I'd love to see Denver win for that reason, and for Jokic, in terms of the amazing play that he's been putting up and just carrying the team and the city on his back the last several years, really. And it would just be great to see them cap off their season, being the top seed in the West for almost, I think, the entire season, really. It would be great to see a small market like Denver win a championship. Part of the original group that was a part of the ABA merger in '76. So it would be great for both teams on so many levels. But for the underdogs, definitely want the underdogs to win. That's just how it is. Miami, as I say in Game 2, returned to regular form. Aggressive, confident, together. They hit the same open shots that they were getting in Game 1. They've proved everyone wrong, including myself. I thought Milwaukee was going to win at the start of the season, and I never changed my mind throughout the playoffs. Miami changed that for me after they beat them, and then I was just like, I don't know who the hell is going to win. The whole playoffs, I feel like this year have been like trying to make your NCAA bracket. Like, you just don't know what the hell is going to happen or when. Game to game, series to series. It's just been really dope to watch everything. All the players, the storylines, the injuries, everything along the way has just made it that much more captivating. And then you have this 8th seed team that is just like fucking messing up everyone's script and just playing this phenomenal style of basketball. This is it too with the playoffs. The playoffs are about players stepping in and stepping up. At any given moment, it could be one game, it could be a whole series. Any little adjustment can make the biggest impact. I think it was evident that after Game 1, Miami should have started Kevin Love, and then they did in Game 2, and it made a significant difference. Aaron Gordon was eating the Miami Heat alive in Game 1. He had like 10 or 12 points, I think, in the first quarter. Game 1, everything was a dunk or a layup. It was easy. It was at the rim. Smaller defenders just getting chewed up in the post. And then you bring Kevin Love in, who's significantly bigger than Gabe Vincent or Caleb Martin, and he made a significant impact on defense and getting his hands on loose balls and getting some strips and some steals, hands in the passing lanes, hitting a couple jumpers. And he doesn't need to do that all game. He just needs to do that in the first quarter to change the tone, change the impact of how the game's going to be played there forward. And he did. And whenever he jumped in, he made his presence known. And they have those vets. They have Kyle Lowry. They've got guys that come in and do that. And I think they have that is like the greatest thing about this Miami team is they're not like your traditional, what is traditional now anyway in the NBA, which is having 1 or 2 superstars, in some cases 3. Doesn't seem to work out if you play in Brooklyn. But if you got these 1 or 2 guys, similar to what happened in that Boston series, you need those 1 or 2 guys to score 40 points a game for you to win. Miami isn't like that. And neither is Jimmy Butler, for what it's worth. He can, and he has done that, but he doesn't need to do that every game, and nor is he expected to drop 40 and have a 40-point triple-double every game, because it's just not the style he plays, and it's just not the style that Miami plays. I'm sure if he was healthy and actually it showed in the first few rounds of the series, like playoffs, that when he's healthy, he can do that. Because he is that good of a player. But Miami has a group of guys that all have the green light, that are all confident, that can all play. And they've shown that throughout the entire playoffs. Like I mentioned earlier, Max Strus, 31 points in the second play-in game against Chicago, which was a huge reason they won that game. And then Jimmy Butler hit all the major and ones and layups and things at the rim, free throws to basically knot that game up. Gabe Vincent had a huge 29-point game in Game 3 against Boston. Duncan Robinson had 22 in that game. And Jimmy Butler only had 16 in that Game 3 against the Celtics. So they just have players that have been able to step up and are stepping up in every occasion. We saw that last game with Duncan Robinson. He had that spurt, like a 10-0 run, 8-0 run in the third quarter. where he was hitting threes and ones and getting to the hoop, which is a huge improvement in Duncan Robinson's game. If anyone's been following him for the past few years, he sits outside the three-point line and just shoots. He's been driving to the hoop all playoffs long. And that's been a huge adjustment because I think most teams aren't expecting that. And I don't know where he got a step from, but he seems to have figured out how to use his body quick enough to I guess, maximize his quickness, however quick Duncan Robinson is. But he's got a step and he's been getting to the hoop, and that's been a huge lift for the Heat because he can do it on both sides of the three-point line now. And it keeps the defense on their toes and it keeps them guessing. And I think Tyler Hero's injury has been great for Duncan Robinson because Duncan Robinson was essentially out of the lineup and out of the rotation for the Heat for, I want to say, the majority of the year. You know, we got a $90 million guy sitting on the bench, which is Duncan Robinson throughout the whole year. They signed him to that big contract, and all of a sudden he just fell out of rotation. I guess he didn't fit into the scheme or whatever it was. And now he's getting minutes. And, you know, Tyler Hero being out is interesting because Gabe Vincent is now getting significant minutes and playing great basketball for them. Obviously having a tough time in this series so far. But Gabe Vincent getting minutes, Martin getting minutes, Duncan Robinson being back in the fold. And then you see, you know, this progression as well from Hero, you know, on his injury and reports of him possibly coming back, which is an interesting conversation because when Miami's playing this good, do you bring him back into the lineup? And if you do, it's probably sparingly so that you don't fuck up everyone's minutes and everyone's rhythm and rotation that you've got fixed already. And then this is the team you're rolling with and riding with. Do you bring him back in? You know, he's obviously a great offensive player. You can't say that the Heat are a better team without him. I think he's their leading scorer, if I'm not mistaken. Former sixth man of the year. Like he's a 20-point-a-game guy. Can certainly bring you a lift. If there's anything Miami's fallen into a trap of throughout the playoffs, it's falling stagnant in periods of the game where they're just not scoring. If Jimmy's cold or if Bam's cold, sometimes the role players fall into that same trap as well, and you got a guy like Hero that can come in and hit you some shots that might be a big lift off the bench and get you some offensive production. But always interesting when the team is playing this good and they're this deep into it that you would fuck up everyone's minutes and bring this guy back in. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I think if they have the opportunity to bring him back, they will bring him back sparingly off the bench. But they got to ride with the guys that have been getting him there and have been along for the ride. And that is Vincent, and that's Martin, and even Highsmith. Highsmith came in, I think it was game 5 maybe? I think it was game 5 against the Boston Celtics. Sort of garbage minutes, but he came in and hit a bunch of threes and got a bunch of steals and got to the hoop. And all of a sudden it was just like, okay, it doesn't look like this guy's fluking out. You know what I mean? Like he's not just like putting up open shots. Like he's getting shots. He's creating shots. He's going to the basket. He's dunking the ball. And he's been getting minutes ever since. And he's giving them really productive minutes. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see what they do with Tyler Hero. Again, like I'm saying with the, you know, Miami team not relying on superstars, just doing it by committee. Everyone's got the green light. Everyone is the guy. Everyone has the confidence to be the guy. And I think that that's what they've been preaching this entire playoffs. Even pre-playoffs, getting into the playoffs, just that little stretch of them trying to gear up for the playoff run, and they're just doing it. You know, look at Caleb Martin, had a tough series so far, having a tough series so far, I should say. 6 points in total in the first 2 games, in a combined, in both games combined, he's played 46 minutes and he's only scored 6 points. That's shit. We know that shit. He knows that shit. But sometimes you don't need Caleb Martin to be the Boston Celtics Caleb Martin that in this series. Maybe other guys come in and step in, and that's what the playoffs are all about. You just never know who's going to be that guy. Sometimes you just do it for 1 quarter. Sometimes you do it for 1 game, 2 games, 3 games, 1 series. Caleb Martin was arguably the best player for the Heat in that Boston Celtics series. Just to give you in context, and obviously we have a small sample size for this series. There's only 2 games, but in these 2 games so far, as I say, 6 total points in 46 minutes. In that Celtics series, he scored a total of 135 points. That's wild. Not only that, but he averaged 19 a game, shooting 60% from the field. Those are like Zion numbers. That's insane. And 49% from three. So this guy was keeping the Heat alive throughout that Celtics series. As much as Jimmy Butler was doing, this guy was consistent. But that was the Celtics series, and that's what got them out of the conference finals. And now they're in the finals, and now everyone else has their opportunity to step in and step up. And that's the beauty of basketball. That's the beauty of sports. It's the beauty of the playoffs. As I say, I think that prior to the series starting, I picked Denver to win 4-2. This has been the first time that I've actually seen Denver play this entire playoff run, and they've just been so they've surprised me in terms of how damn good they are. How fucking good Jokic is. Damn, that boy can play. Murray's just been nice. I feel like Murray might be better now than he's ever been, which is crazy to say because he just came off that injury. And this is his first like full healthy year back since the unforgettable bubble Murray in 2020 when he was just through the roof. I feel like it might be better. And 4-2 is what I predicted prior to the series starting. It's hard for me to go away from that. The inner sports fan of me, like I say, because I root for the underdog, wants Miami to win. Would love to see Miami win in 6 or 7 preferably, because that would just be, every sports fan's dream. See this 8 seed, a basketball sports fan anyway, see this 8 seed team come out of nowhere, just fucking steamroll, basically steamroll, even though it's been tough. Steamrolling some of these teams that just, should be in the finals, right? Should be in the finals. Milwaukee, Boston, all these guys. I would love to see them win. I still think that Denver will win. Please prove me wrong, Miami, because I would love to see them win. I still think the analyst, if that, as it were, if that's even official, if that's an official title, and the analyst in me thinks that Denver will win in 6. I would love to see Miami win in 7. I think Miami wins Game 3 tomorrow. Depending on when I post this might be airing on the day of Game 3, which will be Wednesday. So if that's the case, then I think Miami will win tonight. Game 3, Game 4, who the hell knows? Because game by game, this series has just been so different so far anyways, with the small sample size of 2 games. So really quick wrap up before I go here. Miami wins Game 3. Nuggets in 6. Really rooting for the Heat to win. Heat in 7. Fortunately, I have no vested interest in either team, sports, betting, or otherwise. I just want to see a really good series. So far, it's proving to be that. I'm a Raptors fan, and they didn't make it, so I've just been watching great basketball the entire time and not sweating it, so that's been nice. Anyways, it's been great. Thank you for your time. Basketball, NBA, Finals, Nuggets, Heat, 1-1 series, Game 3 going on tomorrow night, or tonight, depending on when this is posted. And I feel like Miami's going to win Game 3, and this is a crazy series. Thank you for your time. Peace!